years ago, actually almost to the day, maybe a month earlier, we at CWGL at Rutgers had a full-day symposium on the 20th anniversary of Vienna. And so I kind of went back and I said, okay, what did we do 10 years ago? And it was an all-day session with panel after panel. And we focused on 3 issues. The first was women's rights as human rights, which is the one that is most often spoken about when you talk about Vienna amongst the feminist movement. The 2 other issues that we looked at was poverty and inequality, and human rights, democracy, and the right to development. Now, these 2 issues are not talked about very much around Vienna, and they're critical. And they're critical, and I think, given the day that we live in right now, are so important to bring back and resurrect as important human rights issues for us to look at. The video of all these panels are on the CWGL YouTube site, which I think is going to get into the library soon, so they're not going to be lost. And we brought people from around the world to talk about these issues. So let me start with looking at poverty and inequality. 2 days ago, data was released in the United States that infant deaths in the US have risen for the first time in 20 years. Native and Black mothers are 3 times more likely to die than white mothers. And remember, the death rate of white mothers has gone up as well, so it's not as though that was a norm, but it's 3 times worse. Life expectancy overall has fallen in the United States, the richest country in the world. In the meantime, 735 billionaires possess more wealth than half the US population. It's the same country. Globally, while the world economy stopped, and it's something that we really need to acknowledge, COVID made the entire world economy stop at the same time, right? Supply side, demand side, everything stopped. 10 men doubled their fortunes in that time. With 99% of the world population, their incomes fell. So there's something really wrong with the structure, and we need to address it in a really important way. How do we confront this? So Vienna, as Radhika C. has stated, is about the indivisibility of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. And we can talk about cultural rights in context of this. It was a watershed moment in that it recognized that poverty and social exclusion was a violation of human rights and human dignity. That's really important. And it's important for us to keep thinking about that. Poverty is a violation of human rights and human dignity. And what is happening in the world? We're just seeing increases in poverty. So why are we not on the streets screaming about human rights? Some of the work that we did at CWGL, as Charlotte said, I took over as director of CWGL in 2009. And one of the things that we did is to bring these issues of economic policy into the women's movement and into the realm of economic policy making. And there are a few people, colleagues here, who worked with me, so it's very nice to see them all. So we looked at economic policy from a feminist perspective, using the human rights norms and standards that existed, that were passed by governments. So if the governments have passed all these human rights standards, what does it actually say about economic policy, right? And so when we talk about the private, the universal, economic policy is pretty universal, right? We have this capitalism all over the world, and how do we critique it? So a couple of the ways we dealt with it is and I have to say that when I took over and I said, I'm from the Center for Women's Global Leadership and we're working on economic policy, and they're like, that's not a women's rights issue. You're supposed to work on violence and reproductive health. That's all you're supposed to do. And we said, no, we're going to work on economic policy. So the first thing we did is we started training people. We started training activists and said, okay, let me show you the intersection of economic policy and human rights. We brought people to Rutgers. We traveled around the world. We went to AWID. We went all over the place trying to do this kind of training and trying to bring the issue. The second level that we worked on was to write academic papers so that it would get into that realm and so that people would understand that these were important academic issues. And the third was to do policy papers, because not many people read academic papers, sadly, but to bring it to the policy level and give it to policymakers. We also, for example, did a 3-day training for the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, because we were like, okay, you're going to do with human rights, look at what economic policy has to do with human rights.